fighting the war on terrorism than it did describing or explaining its actions. As I saw it, there were 5 main strategic thoughts that the Bush administration developed in the weeks after 9/11. The first, already noted, is that the foremost purpose of the United States is not punishment, but preventing the next attack. In other words, not retaliation for 9/11, but self-defense. Second, the enemy is a network. And while the next attack could come from Al-Qaeda, which of course was responsible for the 9/11 attack, it could also come from other parts of the global movement of Islamist extremist groups. The enemy network includes not only the terrorist groups, but their state supporters. And they maintain among themselves various types of interconnections: operational, logistical, financial, ideological, operational. Third, the chief danger is the possibility that terrorists might use chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons. What 9/11 showed was that we're not dealing with terrorists who are constrained by a desire to win broad international sympathy for their cause. Our enemies are not engaged in terrorism as political theater. Their aim was mass destruction. And so if they could obtain mass destruction weapons, they could be expected to use them. And the result could be the murder of many times the people who died on 9/11. And in this regard, a coincidence of strategic importance was the fact that countries that were leading supporters of terrorism, the list of those countries was essentially the same as the list of the main countries in the world that are countries of WMD proliferation concern. And in the case of Iraq, you had a country that not only had a history of seeking but also of using WMD. Now, fourth, the stakes. A series of 9/11 type terrorist attacks on the United States could change the nature of our country. This was our principal concern. The purpose of our national security policy is not simply to protect people and territory, but to secure our constitutional system, our civil liberties, the open nature of our society. In this openness are rooted our freedom and prosperity. So the stakes in the war were neither small, remote, nor dispensable. In fact, I would argue they couldn't be greater, which is why the President defined our war aim as defeating terrorists as a threat to our way of life. Now, this war aim brings us to the 5th strategic thought, that we cannot rely on a defensive strategy. The United States obviously has more rich targets, more tall buildings, for example, than can be secured individually. If we tried to protect our country mainly by stopping terrorists on our own soil, the government would be under extraordinary pressure, greater by far than at present, to inspect, to intrude on privacy, to limit our movement, to rely on ethnic profiling, and otherwise make highly undesirable, even if necessary, sacrifices of the civil liberties of Americans. The pressure to adopt police-state tactics would increase as new terrorist attacks occurred. So even if it were possible to defend against terrorism this way, it would be at the cost of our way of life as a free and open society. And that is what necessitated the U.S. strategy of initiative and offense, hitting terrorist networks abroad. President Bush decided that in dealing with the terrorists, as I put it, we had to either change the way we live or change the way they live. Now, my book, War and Decision, discusses the development of the U.S. strategy for the war on terrorism, and it focuses in detail on the President's decision to remove the Saddam Hussein regime from power. Iraq was a major problem that the Bush administration inherited from the Clinton administration and from the administration of the President's father. When the Gulf War ended back in 1991, the world had two choices, given that no one believed that we could simply ignore the danger of additional aggression from the Saddam Hussein regime. One choice was to overthrow the regime. The other was to try to contain the danger. Now, the United States did not have the desire, did not want to march to Baghdad to overthrow the Saddam Hussein regime in 1991, and there was no clamor for that around the world. The decision was to try to contain the danger. Now, part of the reason that that decision was made was that containment looked like a promising experiment. 1991 was an unusual moment in world affairs. The Soviet Union was collapsing, and there was the possibility that because of the collapse of the Soviet Union, the UN, for the first time, the UN Security Council, might be able to play the role that it was created to play. It might actually be able to take a major international threat to peace and security and handle the problem short of war. So what the UN Security Council did was it seized on this opportunity after the U.S.-led coalition threw the Iraqis out of Kuwait. It seized on that opportunity and it put in place a set of measures designed to contain the continuing threat from the Saddam Hussein regime. But Saddam systematically undid those measures. He canceled, by 1998, the weapons inspections. He corrupted and undermined the economic sanctions, and he was attacking the patrolling of the no-fly zones over southern and northern Iraq. When Saddam refused cooperation with the UN weapons inspectors in 1998, effectively throwing them out of the country, President Clinton considered that a serious challenge to U.S. interests. At that time, in '98, Representative Nancy Pelosi declared, quote, "Saddam Hussein has been engaged in the development of weapons of mass destruction technology, which is a threat to countries in the region, and he has made a mockery of the weapons inspection process." And Senator Carl Levin, Democrat of Michigan, declared in October 1998, "It's my sincere hope that Saddam Hussein, when faced with the credible threat of the use of force, will comply with the relevant UN Security Council resolutions. But I believe that we must carefully consider other actions, including, if necessary, the use of force to destroy suspect sites if compliance is not achieved." I mean, one could go on and on. There are numerous quotes from leading figures, Republican and Democratic, saying similar things about Saddam's possession of WMD and the threats that he posed to his region and to the United States. In December 1998, President Clinton then ordered 3 days of bombing of Iraq, which was called Operation Desert Fox. When the George W. Bush administration came into office, what to do about Iraq was an important agenda item, even before 9/11. Iraq was the only place in the world at the time where U.S. forces were being shot at virtually every day. The Iraqis were shooting at the British and American airplanes that were patrolling the no-fly zones. So there was a debate about what do we do about Iraq in the first months of the administration. But that debate was not resolved, and no new policy was adopted on Iraq of any great significance when 9/11 occurred. Iraq then was re-examined in light of the 9/11 attack. As I've said, that attack focused officials on the danger of terrorists using WMD and on the coincidence of the list of terrorist state supporters and countries of proliferation concern. And also, as I'm sure you recall, America's tolerance for national security risks went down after 9/11. When President Bush decided to disrupt the worldwide terrorist network from which the next attack against the United States might come, and not just focus on the parties responsible for 9/11, this required the administration to devise ways to deal with all of the main countries all the main terrorist groups and all of the main state supporters of terrorism, even groups and countries that were not involved in the 9/11 plot.